it's a live event. So
Yeah.
you can't prepare anything. You can't we have a schedule and we sort of know what we want to do,
Yeah.
but it's live, it's happening live. Things happen, things change, schedule move around. It's raining, it's not raining, weather, the race, it's a race. We're there to race.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to document and sort of give you the view of me as a creator. I'm trying to sort of project what it would be like for a fan to be at track.
Yeah.
Because we at McLaren, we sort of put our fans front and center. We try to give, because they are the reason why we can go racing.
What's going on, everyone? It's Justin here, and welcome back to the Featured Podcast. And today we have a guest from the McLaren Formula One team. He is the head of video and content, Henrik. As someone like myself who became a huge Formula One fan after seeing Netflix's Drive to Survive documentary, I really want to interview someone who is within that video space of a sport that I've become a huge fan of through content. Henrik does an amazing job, and I believe that McLaren is one of the most future-focused companies on the grid right now when it comes to video content and cinematography. In this episode, I'm going to be talking to him about his path to being a Formula One videographer and his career as a filmmaker, what he plans to do in the future, a day in life of an F1 weekend, which sounds very hectic from his behind the scenes videos, and just like the content direction of where the sport is heading and what he wants to do after that. But before we get started, I would really appreciate if you guys left a review over on Apple Podcasts. It would help us a lot, but let's just jump right into it. Yeah, so I just wanted to let you introduce yourself, talk about how you got into video, and kind of the path into Formula One and how that all came.
Yeah, I think. Well, first of all, I'm from Sweden, and I've lived in London now for 3 years. I got to London because I wanted to go to film school, so that's how I first got here. And right now I work as a creative producer at McLaren. So I kind of oversee the video content strategy for McLaren Racing. There are actually 4 companies. So there's Racing, Applied, Group, and Automotive. And I oversee the video content for Group, Applied, and Racing, and specifically Formula One Racing. And that kind of includes the creative direction and the day-to-day production of the video content that goes out on the social and digital channels. So that's kind of my speciality. That's what I do. And how I got into it, where should I start? I think, yeah, it's a long story, but we have time. So I think it began straight after high school. I didn't know what I wanted to do. At the time, I hadn't even picked up a camera. I didn't do any photography. Really? I was zero experience. Like nothing. I didn't even have a camera at the time. So I loved film though. I loved watching movies. So I think as most people do after high school, you don't know what you want to do really. And there are so many different ways to go. And I think Sweden is one of those places that is very forgiving in the way that you're not forced into anything. At least most people. And you can you can go working, or you can study, or take a year off, travel. You have a lot of options, and there's not too much pressure on that to start studying straight away. So I sort of started thinking, and I loved movies, so I thought, how do you create a film? Like, what goes into it? And with no experience, I started looking at maybe I want to be an actor. I don't know. But I wanted to sort of explore it. Yeah. So I started being extras at short films, commercials, and that's when I sort of discovered, wow, there's actually a big production behind the camera. There's a lot of people, and there's so much work that goes into it, and you're sort of blown away. You don't understand what all these people are doing. It's like some people hanging lights, another one doing audio. There's some director, and there's another director just taking care of the extras. There's so many people, and depending on the production, it could scale up and it can be really big. But that sort of opened up my eyes, and it kind of realized that, oh, it's actually behind the camera. That's pretty cool. So that kind of took me on the journey where I am kind of right now. But I just figured I just need to buy a camera, and I need to explore what this is. Like, what is this medium of creating films and how do you do this? How do you create a video? I didn't have any editing experience, so I got an editing software. So I had a job at the time, and I just saved up money until I could buy a super cheap camera. So I bought a Canon 70D, which was at the time it wasn't the lowest range, but I just said, if I want to do this, let me buy an okay camera. And to me now, I mean, I don't even use a Canon 70D, but for me at the time, it was so big. It was like a super complex camera and all these settings and menus and buttons.
Even the Rebel line, I remember back in the day. The T2i, T3i, 60D, and the 5D looked like the holy grail that was so distant away at the time.
But those are kind of the cameras that you can, in the beginning, actually reach. Because if you go up to Reds and Alexa, those are, you're in a different realm, and it's so complicated. So you can't really access them. And, obviously the financial issue with buying those as well. It's super expensive. So I got a camera, and that's where I just started shooting. So I went on trips with my friends. I went on vacations, and I just brought my camera. I took photos. I didn't do too much, but I just started filming. I started taking pictures. I got an editing software, and I just started editing. I started with Final Cut, and now I'm sort of doing Premiere Pro. But in the beginning, I just wanted to do it so that I wanted to explore if this is something that I'm interested in. And that passion just grew, and it sparked something, and it just escalated very quickly, and I never stopped. That's why I'm here. 5-6 years later, I'm still here. I'm still doing the same thing. I'm still creating, even on my spare time. I love doing it. When I go on vacations, I love taking my camera. I always bring it. So it's funny how one of those moments of just testing something out can spark something that just grows so quickly. So I think that's how I got into it, and that just slowly ramped up. So I did stuff for myself. I took some photos. I did a few travel films that are not that great, but I still have them. I love looking at my old content that I don't think is great now, but at the time I thought it was the best thing ever. And then I actually offered my services for free. So I told people, I found this, actually I went back to my old high school, and they have like a rugby event for each year between different high schools. So there's like a indoors rugby event. And I did the after movie for that event. So that was one of the first films that I did. I did it for free. I just said, I just want to do it. It would be super fun. And that's how I got into actually working with either companies or organizations, just to have more credibility what I'm doing.
Yeah, for sure.
Just so you can showcase that, actually I work with this company, or actually I work with this person, and I added that to my shore reel. And that just, offering those free services and just taking every opportunity that I had, and eventually getting paid, getting paid $100 doing something, or $200, and then it was 500, $1,000, and it just builds on that. And it just takes time and a lot of effort, because now that the amount of time I spent on that production that I got $100 from, I realize now I spent so much time on it, and the value that client got for those $100 was insane. But I had nothing else. If you don't have anything to show, or if that's your price, then just do the work, and it's gonna grow from there. And then I also worked at a super small production company where I was like an assistant director, and they taught me very sort of the basics lighting, the basics camera work, the basic sort of editing. I sort of took the rushes, and I kind of organized them in for their productions, and that taught me a little bit of organization and sort of what it takes to get paid to do this. And then that just kept going until I applied for a job at Sony Mobile. And I worked as a video editor at Sony Mobile I'm just firing through this story a little bit quicker, but I spent 1.5 years as a video editor for Sony Mobile. And then I knew at that time that, okay, I want to go to a bigger city, so that there's a big industry, basically there's more opportunities. And that's when I decided to either move to London or New York. And I applied for different schools. and London is closer to Sweden, so I picked London. And that's when I actually got there, because I through this whole process of me doing all these projects and all these smaller productions, I understood, or I knew that I had to go somewhere. There has to be some kind of end goal to this, all these kind of free projects and all this free work. And that was film school at the time, because I felt like, okay, if I make that step, there's almost like a milestone, and that can then bring me to the next level. And I didn't just want to go into, film school cold turkey, because I wanted to actually experience how it is to work as a video editor or a videographer before I went into film school and spent all that money. But when I actually got to film school, I realized that was never what I think the pace that I was at that moment, my pace and the hunger for me to learn wasn't met with film school.
Yeah.
I felt that I could learn more, and I had to sort of find freelance work while I was at school, outside of school, because I wanted to do more. It wasn't
same
enough
with me in
just
business school, actually. Just felt like it was too slow a pace, when the real world experience within the same amount of time was infinitely bigger, and you wouldn't know what the end, what that end of the 4 years would be compared to when you go to school. You're going to get the piece of paper at the end of that.
Exactly. So that's super difficult. I've had people asking me that question, like, should I go to film school or not?
Yeah.
I don't know what the answer is really, because it's so individual. I always say, like, education is plan A. Always go for education. Like, it's such a good path. The thing is, the only thing that should matter is learning. Like, you should focus on learning, getting better. And school is where you learn, you get better. But there are also other places where you can learn. There are other places where you can get better. So explore, always sort of go for learning. And if film school is, I'm sure it's great for other people, for certain people. For me, it wasn't at the time, but it's always about the learning and, pursuing yourself and sort of investing time in yourself so you can get better. And I'm sure, like you're saying, other people can relate. But you sort of gotta follow your own path and follow your own heart and sort of see what works best for you. And if you find yourself in school and it's not great, then maybe there are other paths. Or just, if you want to be a doctor, you have to go to school. But film is such an abstract, creative kind of,
for sure.
It's not so linear, or you need to have school to kind of continue. So that takes me to the moment where after 6 months, I had done some freelance work, and I had done some work outside of school, and that's when I realized that my work was kind of sought after, and I had a portfolio, I had some experience, and people wanted to work with me. So that gave me the courage to sort of take the risk and leave film school, and that's when I ended up at McLaren. So at the time, sort of when I had I went for a 3-year degree, but I ended up just taking a certificate, just finished those 6 months. And then at the sort of last month of me being in school, I just applied for so many jobs. I just wanted to find work in London. I kind of had that moment of either it's like, it's almost like fight or flight. I could go back to Sweden and I can sort of step back and think, or it's just moving forward and just go for it. And at the time, I felt like I had done so much to come to a big city where there are big opportunities. So I just had to jump, and I just applied for so many jobs, film production jobs, because that is why I came there. So if I could achieve that was a big one. And I didn't know that McLaren would find interest, and sort of the rest is history. I'm 2 years and 3 months later, I'm still at McLaren.
Yeah, it's like, because that path is definitely a cool story. Because actually, our previous guest is a Netflix actor. He was in Riverdale and Lost in Space, and people are often either on the acting side or they're on the production side, and they don't really like people who are acting don't really know what goes on the other side. And he was telling us how the crews are like 150 people in some cases. They're in the middle of nowhere and everybody just knows what they're doing. Whereas in the YouTube side, I've always been used to trying to do a little bit of everything on my own and occasionally having some help. But yeah, I think the point of film school, how you already had experience before that and you built up that portfolio from working for free, that it's just as valuable as kind of, in some cases, people go to film school for connections. Sure. So I think that's in artistic fields and also in business, people often debate whether or not it's really needed. And obviously there are some industries where you have to, law school, doctors, but yeah, film school and entrepreneurship is often like you kind of have to see where you're at and what you have done before that and figure out which direction is best for you. In my case, I was always bad at school to start with, and that was the same university. So I left at around the end of the third year as well and just went full time. And I found that the learning process within the last 18 months has been much faster than, and things are changing so fast in this industry. Like even Formula One, one of the questions I was going to ask you later on was actually, in just the last few years, Formula One and their approach to media, social media, video content has changed a lot. I feel like, just looking back at like the old content and when Liberty took over, it felt like they really elevated themselves to being some of the best content producers in all of sports. Every league's a little bit different in the way they approach it. Hockey, I would almost argue, is a bit behind in its like marketing and video engagement. But I think the next one sort of correlates to the video that you created. What is like a day in life or a race weekend in life of a McLaren videographer? Because it does look kind of hectic. You got the practice days and you got the race days, you got to edit and you have some deadlines. So what is like sort of the day in life of Henrik?
Yeah, I mean, it is very hectic and there is a lot of traveling involved, which is both time consuming but also energy consuming. It takes a lot of your
How many flights did you do last year?
Last year I did, I think I did 19 races last year.
19 races. So that would be...
so there was 21, but I went to Indy 500 actually. So instead of doing Monaco, I went to Indy 500. And then I went to a few other places for like tests and that, but it was 19 or maybe it was 18 races, 18, 19 races, which is a lot. And it takes a lot of your social life as well, you know. It consumes just going back and forth to these places, you spend, it ends up being days on planes just throughout the whole year because you got to go places and you got to see things. But to me, all that that's a part of the job. There's so many bigger positives and the good things outweigh the bad things by far. For sure. And that is all you have to focus on. It does strain your energy. It is time consuming, but that's a part of it. If you want to do this, if you want to experience it, that's what you got to go through. And I love it. So a day in the life is kind of like we sort of look at each weekend as there are different stories to each weekend. And we have a big digital team, or I don't know if it's big, but we're 12, 13 people in the digital team at McLaren. We have 2 video people, and then the rest does different things such as strategy, CRM, social, and shout out to them. They're some of the most incredible, hardworking people that I've ever met, and they're super talented, and I get so much energy and motivation from just working with them. And they are a huge part of everything that I do, but everything that you see on McLaren's channels, this is the team and they're superstars, all of them. So we look at each weekend and we sort of prepare a plan for how this weekend is going to look like. And we look at where is the race? What's the location? Do we have any partners that are kind of tied to that region or that market? So it could be, one example is we have a Spanish driver, so Carlos Sainz, and we have Estrella Galicia, which is a Spanish beer, and they are tied to that market. That's a natural thing. So we perhaps do a lot with them, and we sort of push their brand a little bit more. So it all depends. Yeah. But we look at that, sort of the overview. And then the traveling starts. So, I or someone in the team, we head out. And depending on where you need to go, you leave the Sunday before the race, or in the middle of the week. If it's in Europe, it's a shorter flight.
Yeah.
And
What's the furthest flight
and
you have to do each year?
Australia.
Australia.
That's 28 hours.
28 hours.
Door
I think
to
I
door.
looked it up from where I live. It's going to be like 20, 30 hours. But then I also looked at Middle East, and in some cases there is only like 2 flights a week.
Yeah, it's far. I mean, it's really far. It is. It's tough because it's usually 12, 13 hours, and then you stop.
And
then
your
you
time
have like
change.
2-3 hour layover, and then you have 12, 13 hours again, and then there's 12-hour, time change. So when you land, you're like, where am I? What day is it? What time is it? You're completely confused. So that's a tough one. But Australia is beautiful. I want to go there. I want to explore more of Australia. But so that we start traveling, and then the weekend starts off. And I don't know how much your audience knows about Formula One, but Formula One is like a 4-day weekend. So you have Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and the Thursday is media day. So we do all the TV interviews, photo shoots, journalists do interviews on, written interviews, and any other partner requests that perhaps our partners or that we as the team have for our drivers. So we do sort of try to record everything before the weekend, so we don't disturb the drivers when we sort of get closer to racing and qualifying. And then you have Friday, which is 2 testing days. So they head out to track with engineers, and we sort of prepare the car, and we test the track and see which tires are good, and you do all that. Then you have Friday, Saturday, which is testing and qualifying, and then you have the race on Sunday. So, they're very long days. Each day you sort of wake up super early, and you go to bed very late because you have to edit. So you capture everything on the day, and then all of that, like you as a YouTuber and digital creator, things have to go out very quickly. So you can't sit there and perfect your art. You don't have that luxury. So you sort of got to go through
adjustment layer lots and
it just got to be super quick. So
as tempting as it is to grade each clip individually, I'm sure you have way more footage than we do though on each shoot.
Because that's the thing as well. It's a live event, so you can't prepare anything. You can't we have a schedule and we sort of know what we want to do.
Yeah.
But it's live, it's happening live. Things happen, things change, schedule move around. It's raining, it's not raining, weather, the race, it's a race. We're there to race.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to document and sort of give you the view of me as a creator. I'm trying to sort of project what it would be like for a fan to be at track.
Yeah.
Because we at McLaren, we sort of put our fans front and center. We try to give, because they are the reason why we can go racing. They are sort of the core of everything. And I try to document everything in that container where we can sort of give them that experience. And I'm trying to be, it's almost like you're a part of the team. I'm trying to be that,
for sure,
get that emotion of how it feels like being inside the room. So that's why we do a lot of the sorry, go ahead.
You've got the best view.
Yeah, exactly. So, that's also the kind of the luxury of it, because I get to go almost everywhere, and I gotta share that to the world. I feel I love documenting, like the stuff we have on our hard drives. We have, every year there's like 30, 40 terabytes just like behind the scenes content that we just back up, and having that backed up, like, we can go through so much.
Do you have to back it up, or does someone on the team? Because I struggle with file management, just because like shooting in 4K and 6K. I'm not sure if you guys shoot like 1080 or 4K, or if you shoot RAW. But the file sizes are just like, and especially with certain cameras like the Red, you can't view the files in Finder. You got to import them and see like the weird codes and everything. So I could only imagine how the backup process works. Do you do that yourself, or do you hand them off to somebody who backs it up the first time, and then you take the day footage home and edit it?
We don't have the luxury of having people that can back it up, because we are on the road. That takes me into sort of the kit that I choose to travel with, because everything is kind of reliant on how the weekend looks like. You cannot do everything that you would do in a production. We do that when we shoot. So I don't only go to races, I also create content back in the headquarters in London. So when we have bigger productions and we actually have the time, then we actually shoot in RAW, and we can color grade, and we can back everything up, sound design everything properly. And these bigger productions, I love creating them, and I love sort of diving into them because they are usually very rare, and we don't create too many of them because Formula One is such a fast-paced environment. And but at the races, I have to do everything myself. So I have to back everything up myself. I have to, organize it. I also choose, do I want to shoot in 4K and spend that extra time to, load it into the hard drive, and it's going to take even longer to edit. And always when I do shoot in 4K, I have to proxy all the footage. So I usually do that overnight from Thursday to Friday, because I can't edit it in raw, in full 4K files. Or do I want to shoot in 1080 because it's easier for me to use. So sometimes I just swap in between depending on what I do. If there's like a longer piece where the drivers are just talking, I usually shoot 1080 because it's easier for me to just press record and just let it roll for 10 minutes. But having a 10-minute speaking bit where they in 4K, that's just going to consume my SD card.
And on the 1DX2, the 4K was also a nightmare of a file format.
Oh my god!
Motion JPEG. We used that for 3 years, and everywhere around the world it was shot in motion JPEG, 4K 60, and it was just thank God for the new model that they started switching up the file format. Yeah. But I think I saw you were using the Canon Cinema line, right?
So I'm actually using the 1DX. So I'm using the 1DX.
Yeah, I saw that one in some of the BTS.
Massive file sizes. Like that is a big, I have, now that we talk about it, I have storage issues. So I got to solve that this year. But, I use the Canon L series. So I try to, it depends a little bit on what we shoot on, but when I'm at the track, my sort of go-to is the 1DX. I have the 24-70 2.8, and then I have the 1635. So that's kind of how I can do wide angle, get close to the action, but also have a little bit of space, but not like a zoom lens, because if things change so quickly, sometimes I want to zoom in and I want to be close to something, but then something can happen and I need to kind of go close because it's very loud in the garage. So I've got to go really close so you can hear the audio. So that's when I want a really wide lens. So, sometimes I bring the 70-200 just to have that kind of artsy, cool, it's such a different look with that zoom lens. But otherwise, I try to do the 24-70 or the 1635 because that is kind of, you can get everything with that.
Yeah. So like after like a filming day, is there like a certain like dinner time, and then what's your sort of editing schedule? I remember in the day in life video, it looked like you're editing quite late into the night, and especially when there's a 4-day weekend, and the race is on the last day. Do you ever get like extremely tired by the time it gets to the race day? You're like, oh, I got another day, but then it's the biggest event out of the last 3 days of preparation. Yeah. How tight are the deadlines, for example?
They're fairly tight. So there's usually 1 day turnaround. But the more time you spend on the races, you sort of get used to, you get used to the hours, but you also get used to kind of, you have to know how long it's going to take for you to edit, and you have to manage expectations. You need to say, I need 2 days for this because this is a bigger edit, or I can turn it around. Just like you film something and then you run back in, you just plug in the SD card, edit a few photos, boom, airdrop to your phone, and then they're out. So it depends a little bit. You have to be very versatile and you need to work very fast. So I do spend a lot of time editing, but I think you run on kind of, I don't know, it's so fast paced, and I think you just run on adrenaline a little bit. You just go through it. You're usually more exhausted when you get back, sort of when you're in it so much, and then when you come back after a race weekend, that's usually when it hits you and you're like, shit.
Or even really like the past like couple months where not many people we haven't really been, like for example, last year we were on about 100 flight schedule, and so in between that, it was like just adrenaline. Like you don't know how you have the energy to be traveling twice a week internationally in some cases. But then once we had this kind of like 4-month gap, you start to look back at it and you're like, oh, that was like kind of cool. Or you start to relive what happened previously. But yeah, that's cool to hear, because I know with videographers, there's some people who spend weeks or months or even a year on a project, and they kind of can focus on every little thing. But a very hard part about videography that I've found with working with different people from different industries is, meeting deadlines is tough, both in terms of filming and editing. And in your space, you're also filming on the fly. Like, nothing can happen twice. You have to be able to find that medium of capturing the best content.
One shot.
Yeah, and like make it as versatile as possible. So like I know with McLaren, you guys do like the Instagram side. You also do like YouTube, Twitter. Yep. I've personally found struggles between trying to produce for Instagram stories, Twitter having to be 16:9, YouTube being 16:9, Instagram video being vertical, but then IGTV allowing horizontal. How do you adapt to this many different file formats and editing styles for each one?
Yeah, sometimes I just have to keep that in the back of my head. It's like, I usually know where the content, or sometimes I just ask, like, where do we want this content to go? Where is the best platform? Because we usually we travel, it's usually a creative video person, then we have a social media manager that goes with us to the races. So there's usually 2 people. So I usually create, and then I airdrop, and so I can sort of keep creating all the time, and then you can send it over to the social media manager who send posts and write all the captions, and also creates themselves, on their phone. But it's difficult, because it's with all this portrait stuff, you gotta keep all of that in mind at all times, and it's not just click and or point and shoot and everything is fine. Sometimes you shoot it in landscape, and you're just like, okay, I need this for Instagram swipe up, or I need this for Instagram story. So I'll just have to crop it and just, it's not made for, you haven't shot it in portrait.
It changes too fast.
But that's what you have to work with. You cannot be too precious with everything. Yeah. And I try to, it's usually more important just to capture the moment. And if I have it in my head, and if I get it in portrait, that's awesome. What I usually do, actually, I have a phone. So I usually have my phone, and then I have my camera. And usually I stand and I film portrait on my phone. And then when I know it's going to be for both, and then I shoot normal on my camera, just so I capture both at the same time. And that's a workaround. Sometimes you got to do that. I don't know. How do you do it? Like, how do you deal with it? Because you just have to, you have to reshoot it, if you really want it in crisp quality and the perfect kind of.
The struggle is actually trying to do multiple mediums at once. Because like at heart, video is our most important medium. Like YouTube is the largest channel out of our different platforms. So usually with tech, we'll do a campaign, and we'll film like the review on embargo, and maybe like get it early hands on. But then we go to the press conference that might be like, say, in Switzerland or whatever, and I'm like just getting off the flight or something, and it's the morning after. It is somewhat live, like where, I do the thing where you stand there and you're shooting video and photo, and a lot of times I don't even know what I'm shooting on my phone, I wish I could just focus on one of them. But we shoot both, and then my phone must have I think 20,000 photos / videos on there. It's just all over the place. Organizations all over. We throw it into Visco Video and just do a really quick grade on top of it, export it, goes on Instagram stories, and then we got to quickly take a photo horizontally, where I'll have a staff member do that, and that goes on Twitter, and we're tweeting like the event live, and in some cases we're at an Android event. I know you guys used to be partnered with OnePlus, and we would have to tweet from an Android. You can't tweet from an iPhone in those ones, so you'd have to have another phone tethering off of this one, and it's a mess. And then you got to do photo and video, and then and we haven't traveled with the Red yet for a travel film, but I'm not looking forward to that. But before, it was the 1DX setup with the 1DX3, the Ronin, and I thought that setup was already really heavy. And once we switch over to the Red for the main stuff, it's a whole other level of video. Is just there's so much stuff you have to bring around, and I'm kind of bad about like leaving stuff in different places. But in our case, it sounds yours is probably much more fast paced on the fly and more tiring because there's 4 straight days of it. But it's similar in some ways where we just walk around with both things and just like try to snap everything. And recently bought like a Fuji X100 just so we can take better photos and in RAW format instead of just on an iPhone every time. We just forget about taking photos a lot of the time.
Yeah, I thought about this, getting like a cage for my 1DX or another camera and just like have everything on it. Light, microphone, you can put a phone up so you can, do all the portrait stuff.
The small rig one. I have that one, but there's something about it. I think it was, I couldn't access one of the ports or I couldn't take out the battery without, I think something like that.
I don't like the also having to spend, minutes or 10, 15 minutes setting up and
always loosens.
It's not really that efficient. And I think especially for us, it's like all about efficiency. So that's why when I pack my gear, it's just exactly what I need, nothing else. I don't want to complicate it. And I think this whole thing about, when it's you got to do all that. You said the whole thing about tweeting on an Android, and it's all about, learning and sort of making mistakes, and then you pick it up. Like at some point you just got to do it, and if you do it wrong, then you learn and you don't make the mistake again. Or if you don't have the option, you just got to roll with it and make the best out of the situation. Because if you only have one shot, then you want to get that shot. You don't want to miss it, because then you don't have anything. So it's better to just capture it.
Yeah, my only experience in automotive was actually I did Formula E in 2016 with Jaguar Panasonic.
Nice.
It was one of those things where we emailed the company asking if we could borrow a car to film a video, and they ended up just saying, "Do you want to come to that?" And I didn't even know Formula E was a sport at the time, but it was in Montreal, in the city, the street circuit, which is the cool part about Formula E. The whole like street circuit in the cities. I know some of the Formula One tracks are like that as well, but they kind of just said, do your social content. We've never done it before. And I actually dropped the camera 5 minutes before lights out. The 5D Mark IV ripped the sensor right out. So I shot everything on an iPhone for that trip. And then the second time was NASCAR. And NASCAR was a little bit more lenient in letting us stand like right next to the pit lane and film while the cars were coming through and see all that. But there were still some restrictions, like not filming the inside of the car too closely, just because of those type of things. And I know there's like certain rules that they run over for the media before you attend those. But I think being there, the biggest thing I noticed was these cars are way louder than I think. And I have a friend who used to drive in Formula Renault, I believe, and I think he drove with Carlos at some point. And he was saying like Formula One cars, like if you see it in person, it's just so much faster that you wouldn't be able to believe that a person is inside the car in person. So I'm like, my dream is to go to a Formula One race someday. But with what are you like allowed? Are there certain things that you're not allowed to film, or like they have to be careful of just for competitive reasons with like all the other teams? You don't want, certain people aren't supposed to see certain things. What are like the restrictions, and how do you work around that?
Yeah, there's a lot of restrictions. I think you touched on a really good point when you said the NASCAR thing. So I haven't been to NASCAR actually. I would love to go on. Same
Formula is way better.
Formula E even was way better. But I also want to go to Formula E. But I've been to IndyCar and I've been to obviously Formula One. It's so different. Just IndyCar and Formula One, just that is very different, and the amount of access that you're getting is incredible. I still to this day say like I was to Indy 500, which is a massive race, but I said that's actually the most fun race that I've been to.
Really,
in terms of just the community, the amount of people, the access fans have, they're next to the car, literally. They just walk next to the car while it's being pushed out. In Formula One, it's not like that. You're in this paddock. It's just you gotta have a pass to get in there. There's very few people there, the teams, and then there's celebrities and media and all
Same
that kind
Formula
of stuff.
E,
So
it was just like they give you the VIP pass, and then only certain people are allowed. Whereas NASCAR, it was still like a guest pass with NASCAR, but I felt like there was a lot of people who can take a look at the cars, and all the team staff are just standing there and waiting for the race to start, sort of thing. But I noticed Formula E was a little bit tighter. We were able to walk by the cars and stuff, but we weren't able to like stop and take pictures. There was always people like watching and stuff, but it is very different. Like NASCAR is just like a very American sport. We went to the one in Florida, I believe, last year. But the Formula E was definitely a really cool experience. I wish I knew more about the sport at the time, but it was like a good it has a lot of similarities to Formula One being part of the FIA. But yeah, that was IndyCar. I actually don't know that much about, but I know McLaren is part of it, and we saw that at CES. They had the IndyCar parked in front of one of the partner booths. And yeah, it's that's
super cool.
Formula One is like the street circuits are ones that I like would love to go to one day.
Yeah. So to answer your question, there is so much restriction. So first of all, IndyCar, they don't have as many restrictions as Formula One, but Formula One has a lot of restrictions. So first of all, F1 sort of, they have their social media guidelines in terms of where you're allowed to film, when you're allowed to film, and especially surrounding the sessions. So during the practice sessions, qualifying and race, because it's kind of broadcast. They want to save everything for the broadcast. So that's where the story is told. But our job is to tell the story around everything else. So what's happening between the sessions, what's happening behind the closed doors.
Yeah.
So that's what we focus on. That's what we can do. So whenever the race is on, you're not allowed to film out on the track. You're not allowed to capture the cars when they're on track.
Really?
You're not allowed to film outside. You're not even allowed to film from the garage, out from the garage, because you can see the pit lane. So you got to film in. So that's why. So that's a big restriction.
So are you on the pit wall usually during the race, or?
No. So I'm standing inside the garage usually.
Oh.
So I sort of get close to the mechanics. It's a little bit like a dance. You sort of have to, because there's so much happening inside the garage, especially during a session. So you sort of got to move around. Now after I've been there so long, they know where I am. They know where I usually stand. They just tap me on the back or they push me away, and I'm kind of, I know what it's like to be in there, but in the beginning it's very overwhelming because they move around so fast and they have to get the tires on. And if you're standing in the way, you're going to get moved. And, it doesn't matter if it's pleasant or not, but they have to do their job. So it's very sort of, you have to be careful when you're inside the garage. But then, so that's sort of the F1 regulations and sort of what you can and cannot do. But then obviously the team has a lot of secrets, or, how the car is built. So whenever the chassis is sort of stripped and you can see the engine, all that, you can't shoot and you can't film. So with the time I've spent there, I kind of know what I can and cannot do, but we always have filters. So I always talk to the engineers and I show them what I'm capturing, just to make sure that there's nothing sensitive that I've captured. Because I'm trying to, they joke around with me because I'm trying to push the limit all the time. I'm kind of like, I want to show
shooting at f1.4 and having the engine focus.
Yeah, that's like a big no. But they always say that I'm trying to reveal all McLaren secrets, which, to be fair, I'm capturing everything.
Yeah.
But they know that I'm allowed to capture everything. Sometimes they just say there's no point in you filming this because you're not going to be able to use this. But other than that, I almost capture everything. But then I sort of filter everything through, and I know what I can and cannot show. And then I make sure that we show it to the right people so they can check it and censor check it.
So is there always like a last layer in the social team, like one person who watches it through really quickly before everything goes out to ensure, or is like the social guy in charge of that?
Yeah. So we usually do. So it's me. I obviously do the first kind of edit, so I filter through everything that I kind of think, and sometimes I try to leave things in that may or may not be there, and then we show it to the social team. Then we actually, depending on what it is, if it's me filming the car, like specific parts of the car or specs on it, then, or I'm in the garage, then I always sort of want to show it to someone in the racing team and one of the head engineers, or
for sure.
And give them the filtered sort of the last say, because I don't know, things on a Formula One car change between days. Every race, there are different parts on it. Every weekend things change. They could be in the middle of the weekend, the floor change, things on the front wing or rear wing change. Things all over. If you're really close to a car, you can, in the beginning of the year and the end of the year, they're so different. You're like, how did they change so much? But they just keep tweaking and keep testing, and they just keep pushing sort of the limit on what it can and cannot do. And depending on the race, they also have to change because, they're different
Different tracks.
environment. They're, city track, or it's warm, or it's perhaps some tracks it's raining a lot, or it's high altitude. So they have to change things all the time, which makes the sport really interesting. And you don't really see that because it's so complex and it takes time to get into it.
On TV,
but once you do, once you get into it, you realize that, wow, there's so much depth in it. And the car, as I always say, F1 is the biggest team sport. There's one driver, but there's 1,000 people who build a car. So those are the people that are the whole team, and those are the one that puts this together. And there's one driver that drives it.
For sure. Yeah, we just got 2 more questions. I think it's what from watching. So I started out watching the Netflix documentary, and it showed like a lot of the behind the scenes, but it also told a story, especially in the first season, of like the dynamic between drivers, the story behind each one, and how they got there, and sort of like the shuffling of different teams. And I think for anyone who hadn't watched any Formula One, it was the best way they could have told the story and made it engaging beyond when a lot of times before the only experience I had with Formula One was when you're walking by a sports bar and you see some cars driving around on TV.
Yeah, exactly.
And when you don't know anything about racing, you're kind of like, well, it's just watching a car go around 70 laps. Like, what's so exciting about that? And I think a lot of times when we see it on TV, we don't see the little changes in the cars. The cars flying around at like 200-300 kilometers an hour that if they made a small floor change, nobody's ever going to notice it. Whereas the documentary may have gone a little bit deeper into like some of the little tweaks that they make and the drama behind and like the crews and stuff and the team principles. And I know some teams were more involved than others in the first season. But yeah, I think that documentary, at least from my point of view, was a really good way of bringing a new generation of fans into Formula One and showing the history behind the sport. A lot of times with hockey, soccer, and football and all that, basketball, there's 30, 31, 32 teams in the league, and there's however many players each year that, aside from like the biggest superstars, you don't really remember anybody else from 5-10 years ago. Whereas in Formula One, the history behind it is still so important. Like I remember going back and watching some 1999 races and McLaren's history, Ferrari's history, and all that stuff, and the stories of like the 2009 the Braun F1 team with Jenson Button. Like it's just cool that like even drivers from the 90s and everything are still remembered and talked about and still involved in the sport today. How do you like the direction that Formula One is taking with media and what McLaren specifically is doing, and how much creative control do you have in terms of how you approach the content? I know like what I really like about the Unboxed series is that it is just like it's a cinematic experience, but also very raw and storytelling and essentially achieves the motive of a behind the scenes look that nobody else can get.
Yeah. So I love the direction that, first of all, I love the direction where Formula One, the sport, but also where McLaren is heading. Maybe I'm biased, but I think McLaren is doing something that no other team is doing.
Yeah.
I think we're very different, and I think the biggest teams, they have their kind of style to how they create content, and we've established our own within the past few years, and I really love that thing. So it's what I said earlier. Like, we try to put the fans in focus, but I also, the whole Unboxed series comes from we've looked at soccer, how you call it, but it's actually football.
Yeah, in North America they call it soccer.
Yeah, but so we look at a lot of those sports teams, and we take inspiration from them, but we sort of try to take their concepts and then make it into something unique and something that we can create ourselves. And the Unboxed is such a great example of something that is so, stripping everything back. What is actually interesting about Formula One?
And the drivers too, gives it like their personality. I mean, and McLaren has a great dynamic with Carlos and Lando, who seem to love being on camera, and I'm sure that's a big factor. And with Daniel coming in, I'm sure that'll be a lot of fun. His dynamic with Lando. I think like McLaren, I think in the documentary in the first season, it showed McLaren was at a point where there was a bit of struggle and direction, and then near the end of the documentary showed like what the future was to hold with 2 new drivers next year and everything. So as someone who transitioned into watching just last season, I think it's been cool that in essentially every aspect, McLaren has done everything that they set out to do, that they had talked about in that documentary, both like on the track and then also the media side of things.
Yeah, we have we have this since Zach Brown came into the team. There's a lot of changes that have been made, and I mean, there's a lot of people that have come after him, and I've been a part of that change that has happened. We brought in some younger people, and especially in the digital social team, which is a young medium, and we I think we just trying to put our take on it, and to sort of answer the question about how much freedom I have. I think in the beginning, I didn't have as much as I have now, so it took time for me I wanted to take what I like and what I enjoy, and sort of take my truth and my heart and put that into the team in any way that I could, and in the video content specifically. I wanted to create something that hasn't been done before in Formula One, and I think they were very behind. They are catching up, but they were very behind in terms of social and digital, and getting a young audience into it. The whole Netflix thing is a big part of that, getting some new generation, getting more people excited about the sport. And we at McLaren, we're trying to do the same thing. We're trying to get more people excited about the sports, more people excited about McLaren, about our drivers, and making something fun and exciting about it. And I'm not a Formula One. I've not been a Formula One fan my whole life. I love filmmaking. I love creating videos. I love telling stories. So even I hadn't done any car stuff even before I started at McLaren. But I think me coming in with a fresh eyes and a view that isn't focused. I didn't even know any of the drivers. Like, I didn't know any of them. So to me, I came into this world which was completely fresh and new for me.
Which is good, and sometimes. You have
which is good. And I even said that in my job interview. I said that I have no experience in this, but I think that could be one of my strengths, because I can see everything from a new perspective, and I hope that I did. And now I think, looking back, I think that I also achieved that to a certain extent. I think I got in, and I just wanted to show something different. And that behind the scenes stuff is me just saying, and shout out to Nick in my team, who's come up with the idea. We just wanted to show how, if you strip everything back and you just show the basics of everything, no music, don't make it too fancy, just make it a cinematic experience where you can experience how it is like to be at track. And just, how is it? And that is where that came from. And then that developed sort of over time. And sort of the more videos you create, the more stories and the more personalities you can sort of get across. And it starts with the drivers, but then I also want to bring in the team. The team is such a huge part of it. So who are they, and how can they be a part of this whole team that you don't see? Because on TV, you just see the drivers. It's the one person. But
and they're in the car most of the time on TV.
Yeah, they're in and then they're in front of the camera and they get a few questions. But how do you get the personality? And I just started observing, documenting, observing. Don't overthink it, and just let that happen. And that is how we started with that. And then the Carlos and Lando connection, they're hilarious together, and they have a very good relationship. So that was very natural, and we started creating some fun videos with that. And we try to not perfect things too much. We just let it happen. Observe, just create a good environment where people can show their true selves and their real personalities. And that's usually where most of our content kind of starts from. It's just human and truthful and fan focused, and that's what we try to do.
Yeah, and I think like your filmmaking experience and skills within that realm make it a better experience? Because as someone who makes videos, I want to watch videos that look good and like the way they're graded. Like you pay attention to that stuff.
Yeah.
The hardest part with travel films a lot of times is you're filming a lot of B-roll, but the story is the toughest part. And I feel like the medium that you guys have found with storytelling and cinematics is what makes it very different. And a lot of times with teams that have a lot of heritage or a long history, they're a little bit more stubborn to try new things. So I think it's cool that McLaren's like the first team that has been around for since like whichever year it was, that is kind of switched over to like a very young and fresh approach. And Lando, obviously with like the streaming, how he goes on Twitch and everything is like the perfect example of a great driver who also is that new generation with like the whole off season and the virtual racing. I think it's just cool to see where the sport is going, but it's also nice to look back and see what's been in the past as someone who is new to the sport. The last question that I have is, what's your favorite track and why? To film or to attend? Because from the outside, I really want to go to Monaco, obviously.
Yeah.
But from a driver's perspective, when I asked my friend Melville, he was saying that he loved like Suzuka just because it's like a driver's track, that kind of thing. But
I think so. I said earlier that I think Indy 500 was one of the coolest experiences I had, which I still stand by. But it was kind of a cool racing experience. In terms of the track and where I've been, there are a few that I love, and it's usually tied to the track, but also the city. So the races where you're close to a city are awesome. So, Montreal is awesome. Melbourne is great. I love Singapore, street track, nighttime. That's awesome. And you live, you walk the track. So you live inside the city and just walk the track. It's awesome. Monaco is cool. That's such a historic track, but I wouldn't say it's one of my favorites.
Is it overrated a little bit? Because everybody wants to go to that one.
I don't think it's overrated. But I don't. It's not my kind of track. It's like it's very glamorous. It's like I don't think it's. Yeah, I don't know. It's not my kind of thing. It's different. Everyone likes different things. But then I do think Suzuka is one of my favorites because Japan is such a cool place.
Oh yeah.
Last year I spent a week after Suzuka and I just traveled. So I went to Kyoto and then I went to Tokyo, and that was my first time being in Japan.
Yeah.
And that was just a sick experience. I loved it. It's so different. Everything is different. The people, the food.
What month were you guys there?
It looks different visually. Sorry?
What month were you guys there again? It was.
So we were there in October.
Oh, nice. Yeah. I went in. I think I went in June or July, but it was so hot. I wish I stayed for. There was a few destinations that I wish I stayed a little bit. But I remember there was that soundbite on social last year about. I think it was the engineer saying to Lando after a race, he was like, "You ready to eat some sushi?" And he was like, "I'm gonna get sick or whatever it is."
He doesn't love fish. He can't.
I don't like it either. Actually, I didn't have any fish that whole trip.
So, but I think if I had to pick one. It had to be maybe Melbourne or Singapore. It's one of those because it just makes the whole trip like if you're in a cool town, it's like it's a good vibe. Then you love it. But Suzuka is also great because the hotel isn't as fancy as some of the other ones, but it just the town that we're in is awesome. There's this small bar, the karaoke bar down the street. The food is different. It just makes it a cool experience. So there's so many different races that have different, positives. And Suzuka is awesome, great street track. But I think Melbourne or Singapore. I do love Canada. Like Montreal, I could live in Canada.
Yeah, it's a lot like Europe, actually. Because I know the track is different from Formula E versus Formula 1 in Montreal. But the one I went to was in the middle of downtown, and they did a street circuit. That was the last time they did it, though. The city didn't like it because it was just like so disruptive to traffic and residents and everything.
It is crazy, yeah.
Yeah, I think the one I went to must have been the last year they did it. They canceled it the year after. But yeah, it definitely has a bit of a different. Like Quebec in general is really nice. In the fall, it's awesome, and Abu Dhabi also looks like a great track, but.
You're
There's just
right.
so many, like 20 destinations a year. It's with the amount of flying, I couldn't imagine how much flying there is.
I think every single track has its own
Yeah.
beauty. Like everyone is cool in its own way,
And
but there
Monza's
are
close to the
certain
city
ones.
too, right? Monza.
Which one?
Monza
Yeah. Oh,
is
yeah.
close to
Yeah,
Milan,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, that's cool.
How
I
Ferrari
think
does.
I think to me it's like there are certain ones that you sort of want to go back to, and you're like,
Yeah.
that was really cool. But experiencing all of them is amazing. Just every single, doesn't matter which one, it's just awesome.
For sure.
Doesn't matter which one.
And like Vietnam, hopefully next year, it looks like a
Oh, yeah.
pretty fast track.
Yeah, I was looking forward to that one. Unfortunately, we're not gonna have it this year, but maybe next.
Yeah,
Fingers crossed.
for sure. Yeah, well, sorry we went a little bit over time, but
No problem.
thanks so much for sitting down with us and talking about the behind the scenes scoop of the McLaren Formula One team. And we'll be sure to put some footage over on the video version as well, whatever we're allowed to use. But yeah, that was cool listening to.
Thank you for
to
having
everything.
me.
So I really hope you guys enjoyed this episode and just gives us like a behind the scenes look of what it's like to be on the grid for a Formula One weekend. And that is like my dream job. So Henrik has been a great guest. We actually chatted for like an hour after that recording about like video, gear, and YouTube side of things. But thank you guys so much for tuning into this episode, and I'll see you guys in the next one.